Hi, hello everyone. I can see people joining in. All right, we'll give it a little bit more time. Yeah, people are joining. Hi. So hopefully you all know which webinar you're joining. So there you go. It's what's new in Jakarta EE 10, part 1 of the webinar series, 3-part webinar series. And today we are focusing on microservices and Jakarta EE 10. Yeah, we have quite a few people already. So welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depends on where you are in the world. So a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off. You should have an option of chat and Q&A available for you. So please, if you have any questions during the webinar at any time, make sure you post them in the chat. It's either chat or Q&A. It doesn't really matter. I will be keeping an eye on your questions and then passing them over to Lukman towards the end. Also, the chat is open to everyone, so feel free if you want to discuss anything, anything interesting that we will be talking about, that we're mentioning, and others, we are the open source community, so other people can also answer your questions. So maybe even using chat option is even better because everyone can see your question. Right, so I believe we'll be getting more and more people joining us anyway, so we'll start now because it's 2 past. So if anyone joins us a little bit later, then it's fine. So yes, so this is the part 1 of our Jakarta EE 10 What's New webinar series. And our speaker for today is Lukman Said, who is a Jakarta EE specialist and a technical writer at Payara. So so today is all about microservices, and to be fair, there isn't much more to introduce really, so I will pass it over to you, Lukman, and and if you guys have any questions, please post them while we're presenting. Thank you. So I'll stop sharing now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dominica. Welcome everybody, and a good afternoon from Accra, Ghana. It's currently 3 p.m., but morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. I'll just share my screen, my IDE, Jakarta EE, Microservices, share. Everybody can see my screen?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah. Okay, so as all of you are aware, Jakarta EE 10 was released last September, and it marks the first feature release of the platform since it was moved to the Eclipse Foundation. It's a jam-packed release, and there's a lot of things to explore, which I really encourage you to do. But for this very short talk, we're just going to look at these topics here. The first one is the core profile. So Jakarta EE or Java EE in the past had the concept of profiles, which essentially is a collection of subsets of the various specs on the platform. But Jakarta EE 10 introduced the concept of core profile, which is a very slim, very slim subset of the platform aimed at containerized runtimes, essentially microservices and Docker and that kind of infrastructure. And so you have just these specifications available for the core profile: annotations, CDI Lite, Jakarta injection, dependency injection interceptors, JSON processing, JSON binding, and then Jakarta REST or Jakarta Restful web services. So these are the only profile or the only specs you have in the core profile. And the goal is to give you a very light runtime that you can use to design microservices. So for example, this sample application that I set up here, this sample code is using the core profile. And with the core profile, I only I'm limited to just these specifications. And so if I come into any of the classes, for instance, in this class here, and then I do something like at not now, if I type at not now here, you will see there is no at not now from the Jakarta validation API, because the Jakarta beam validation is really not part of this particular profile here. So the core profile is a very new profile that is aimed at giving you a very slimmed down version of the platform. One of the problems that people used to have, or one of the complaints, was that the platform was too huge and that there are times when you just need few things. And this is exactly what you're getting with the core profile. So this sample code here is using the full or just the core profile for everything in here. So I just have a very small subset of everything. And all we are doing is creating RESTful web services. Now, as we have the RESTful web services, or as we have this particular list here, doing the RESTful web services, obviously every application needs someone to store the data. But since this core profile here does not have JPA, the idea would be that generally in the microservices, especially in a cloud native environment, you could store your data, application data anywhere in the NoSQL database. So for our sample code here, I actually set up the application to talk to Google's Firestore database. So Firestore is a NoSQL database in the Google products, Firebase product, yes. So Firestore, Firebase, sorry, Google, Firestore, NoSQL database. And so this particular setup here, it's a Jakarta EE application where you simply make a REST call to an endpoint here, for instance, this service resource here. And then we take this and then do some transformations and eventually persist the data to the cloud. So this here, end to end, is just the core profile. There's nothing huge in here, just the core profile, and then we are running. So just to demo you, I just set everything up. We can just make a quick call to it. And then this should just work. So I have my response here. And then if I go into my cloud console, you can see this is the data I just persisted. These are some sample data. This is what just came in. And this is directly to the Cloud Firestore database. So this is, this is essentially in the microservices spirit. You have a very small runtime that you can use to craft. Most of the time, your resources or your application is going to be exposed as RESTful web service, which I did, or which we have here. And then the implementation is just going to be as slim as you can, delegating as much as you can to a lot of cloud native infrastructure, as we have here with the Google Cloud Firestore. So this is just about it with the core profile. You have a very slimmed down profile of the platform aimed at giving you an even slimmer version of the Jakarta EE platform. Now, I need to mention here that since time immemorial, Jakarta EE has always been focused on giving you, helping you separate the runtime from the application code. So that is why you have the concept of, that's why you still have the concept of application runtimes, or in the past, we call them application servers. So the application server takes charge of all the implementation and everything, and then you just focus on your business code. So if you come here in our dependencies here, you can see the scope here is provided. So the WAR file that is generated for application does not include even these runtime as well, these runtime dependencies as well. It's just our application code that we are focusing on. So with this core profile, we even have a much slimmer version of the platform to use. It's also good to know that the core profile is going to be the baseline for microprofile, Eclipse microprofile version 6 that has just been released. So once you put in microprofile version 6, then you have these automatically available. Now, the next feature in the absence of any question, Dominica, just if there's any question as I go along, just feel free to let me know.
Yeah, no questions for now.
Okay, great. Now, the next feature is Java 17. Jakarta EE 10 has support for Java 17. It targeted both Java 11 and Java 17. Obviously, there's been a lot of change in the Java world, or the Java SE world, with the new release cadence and everything. So there's always a new feature with a number of features with each release, and Java 17 was no exception. Now with Jakarta EE 10, you can use all the features from Java 8 all the way to Java 17 in your enterprise application. So for this sample application, we have records here that we are using. If we come to our resource declaration here, what we are doing is that the resource consumes a record. There's nothing POJO or anything here. It's just a record, which gives us a very, very simple and readable, and without the ceremonial code, plain old Java object, ceremonial code and all that. We're just consuming the record here. And that is exactly what I'm sending from my request here to the back end. This is just the record JSON record representation that I'm sending out to the back end. So with Jakarta EE 10, you also have the records available and everything released in Java 17 all the way back. So you can take advantage of all of that for your application development. Then we move on to CDI. Everybody knows that, or everybody should know at least, that the Jakarta EE runtime, or the platform, is essentially held together or glued together by CDI. And if you are not, or you don't know, or you are new to CDI, CDI is the inversion of control implementation on the Jakarta EE platform. It's a very powerful set of APIs that you can use to create very sophisticated applications. Now, Jakarta EE 10 in the core profile, or not the core profile, the Jakarta EE 10 has CDI in different profiles as well. So we have core CDI, and then we have CDI full, then we have CDI Lite. Now, if you are using the core profile, then naturally you have the core or Lite CDI available in the core profile. The naming can get a little bit tongue twisting, but eventually you get the hang of it. So CDI Lite ships as part of Jakarta EE core profile, which essentially makes sense because if we are going the lighter way, then we also pick the lighter CDI version, and CDI Lite, gonna take a bit of time to get used to that. CDI Lite is essentially CDI, but with a bit of fat removed. So these are the stuff that are not available in the CDI Lite. So if you are used to session scope and conversation scope, session scope mostly for HTTP sessions, of course, which adds up because if you are using the core profile and you are developing or exposing your application as a set of RESTful web services, you really don't have need to keep state. So session scope not being available obviously adds up. And then the conversation scope here, this is mostly for Jakarta faces. You really don't need this in this profile. So this is out of the way. And then some parts of the Bean Manager API, then a bit of all of this around invoke interceptors and all of this. But generally for a lot of applications, you really won't notice the difference between the various scopes of CDI Lite or CDI full. You're really not going to notice this unless you are in an enterprise, typical enterprise application, and then these features come through. But if you're developing a modern cloud native application to be deployed to the cloud using cloud services, as we are doing here with our data, then you really are not going to miss these guys here. And that gives you even less things or less APIs to think about in your application. So Jakarta EE10 core profile ships with CDI Lite, and CDI Lite is the normal CDI, as you probably know of, with the exception of these APIs or these features here. So that's it with CDI Lite. Now, in our application here, we have CDI available just fine. In our resources here, we are doing our injection here, which is working just fine and all that. Everything is working fine because we still have CDI. And CDI Lite is really not some sort of low budget CDI. It's CDI without a lot of legacy, a lot of much more enterprisey traditional application features. So CDI Lite is also in line with making the platform or creating a much slimmer profile, which adds up here with the core profile here. So CDI Lite, CDI without the fat over here. And then we have bootstrap, RESTful web service bootstrap. Now, in the past, you had one way of running Jakarta EE RESTful web services, which would be through deploying the REST endpoints on an application server. Of course, this worked just fine, but then this made it a little bit cumbersome to, for instance, test your RESTful web services. If you needed to test your RESTful web services or do a quick assertions or do a quick run for a given RESTful web resource, then you needed to spin up a container and all of that. Of course, this is really spinning up a container in this cloud native times that we are. It's really nothing other than just deploying your Docker or starting your Docker instance and then running your server or pushing to a cloud runtime that supports your application. But sometimes it's just convenient to have a very easy way of doing things that you can even do in a normal public static void main method, and then you have something running. And that is exactly what the SE Bootstrap API is here for. So you can use this to, as the name implies, to bootstrap a RESTful resource and then have it available outside of a container. Now, under the hood, the implementation is using HTTP servers and all of that, but you are abstracted away from that. You're abstracted away from that to give you the piece of being able to use Jakarta REST outside of a container. So in this particular test, for instance, I have this particular resource, Hello Bootstrap resource here. A typical Jakarta REST produces a path, blah, 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 blah. And then in the test, all I'm doing is bootstrapping it with the API and then making a call to it, then making some assertions on the returned response from the call. Dominica, any question yet?
Yes, we actually have a question. So that's a question from Paddy. How different is the dependency injection?
If you are referring to CDI, there is absolutely no difference. And this is one of the powerful features of Jakarta EE, the Jakarta EE platform. You absolutely don't need to know or change anything. CDI Lite is essentially CDI, but with a lot of a number of the APIs that are targeted at much more traditional, much more legacy applications. Those features that are normally not directed at modern cloud native, mostly RESTful web services applications, those features are taken out. So if we come into the partner resource implementation here, this at inject is just doing its work. It's injecting an instance, a contextual instance of the partner service in here. Of course, the CDI runtime is going to do the proxying and everything. Now, this partner service here is application scoped here. It's an application scoped view that is doing exactly what you know. So all the scopes that you know request application scope, with the exception of the session and the conversation scope. the dependent scope, which is the default, request scope, they are all still available for you. So even though this particular sample that we have here, this particular application that we have here is using the core profile, which ships with CDI Lite, there is practically no difference for you as a developer. From your perspective, there is no difference other than a much slimmer runtime and an even thinner WAR file to deploy, and less APIs for you to worry about when you are developing your application. Other than that, there is, from your perspective as a developer, you don't need to even think about it. I could just drop this, and then you could develop your application without even knowing that you are using the core profile. So yeah, you don't really need to think about CDI Lite at all. It's just CDI without the fact, if you so will.
Yeah, no more questions at the moment.
No more questions. Okay, that's fine. So in the Bootstrap API, you can just use it. There are different options you can use, but here we are simply bootstrapping without passing in any sort of settings or configuration. You can also pass in configuration when you are bootstrapping the API. So you can set the protocol, the host, the port, the root path, SSL authentication, and all of that. You have all these options available as well. And this is one of the new features of the Jakarta REST web services that shipped with Jakarta EE 10. So now in your application, if you want to do a quick prototyping or something, you don't need to spin up the full application server. You can quickly do that using the Bootstrap API. And then we have OpenID Connect. Now, in the past, also, in the past, setting up authentication on the platform was a little bit not so straightforward. But with the release of Jakarta EE 10, we now have the OpenID authentication mechanism definition that we can use to define an OpenID authentication flow. Now, OpenID authentication is essentially delegating authentication to an authorization server, for instance, Keycloak, or any of the hosted cloud, any of the cloud and security services like Authy or Auth0 or any of them, or Okta. We delegate, the application is going to delegate authentication to that server. And then all the application will do is to then verify that the user is actually who they say they are based on the authorization or authentication and authorization of the server. And to do that, we can just use this annotation here, and then with all the various options we have here, the provider URI, the client's ID, the client's secrets, and all of that, we have all these redirect URI. All of these are now part of the platform itself. In the past, the other option you had was to use the microprofile security or microprofile authentication mechanism. But now this is built into the platform for you to use. So we could actually add Keycloak authentication to our Docker Compose file and then have everything in the application once defined here through the OpenID authentication mechanism annotation here. And this is part of the Jakarta security API that came out as part of Jakarta EE 10. So a quick recap again. Here we have Jakarta EE 10, we have core profile, we have support for Java 17, which means most of the time you're going to use records to really do away with all the Java Bean ceremonial code. And then we have CDI, much more slimmed down without the fact. And then we have the Bootstrap API. Then we have OpenID Connect. Now, obviously, Jakarta EE here will need a runtime to run. And there are a number of runtime implementations out there. For our use case here, I'm using Payara, which is one of the top runtime implementations out there that you can check out to run our application. Now, of course, there are a lot of them, and that is the beauty of Jakarta. a lot of runtimes, and you, the developer, you are abstracted from knowing about the runtime. We leave the development of the runtime to people that know, obviously, runtime development. So for this code, what I'm doing is simply running the sample code in a Payara server through Docker. This is Payara 6, Payara Community 6 in a Docker container. And so if I come down here, you can see my container here, running everything for me as and when I need. So there are a number of runtimes out there, and of course, naturally, Payara is one of them. And you, as the developer, you are separated from them. Again, if you come to our profiles here, this is already provided here. So the runtime is providing that for us. The runtime has assembled all the implementations of the various APIs and is providing that for us. So just to recap, Jakarta EE 10 is a very interesting release, the most important release of any framework on the Java platform in the last 10 years, I can say, because it marked a shift in the direction, the future direction of enterprise application development on the platform. And so Jakarta EE 10 is really something you should check out if you've not done so yet. And to make your life easy, feel free to check out just the core profile, play around with the bootstrapping of your resources through some system.out.println, or sorry, some system adds main method, and then play along with it. Jakarta EE 10 is something that really will make your life easy, and it's remarkable because it's the first community-driven release of the platform. So I really encourage you to give it a go, take a look at it, and then check out the implementation for your own development purposes. Dominica, do you have a question?
No, it doesn't look like we have any more questions unless someone wants to ask any right now. But nothing as of now. I don't know, Lukman, if you've got anything else to add then.
Yeah, just to add that the idea, or there used to be this notion that the Jakarta EE platform was really not suited to modern paradigms like microservices, cloud native, but I can confidently say that that is a bit of a misunderstanding, because you can actually do a lot of things, or almost everything other frameworks can do, with the Jakarta EE platform. As you can see, this application is persisting its data in the cloud to the Google NoSQL database without any effort on my part. All I did was to set up things and use the number of APIs available, and then I'm just pushing this into the cloud. So this is essentially a cloud native application that I have here. It's a number of services. For lack of time, we really can't go through all of them, but it's a number of services, very slim, because there is no JPA, there is no entity manager, there is no database. The database is running in the cloud, and I'm just simply instantiating object and pushing into the database. So Jakarta EE is actually a cloud native or cloud ready platform that you really want to take a look at if you've been away from the platform for a while. Yeah, over to you, Dominica.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Lukman. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, then please you can still ask them. So basically, I just thought for some of you who might be new to Payara Platform, just wanted to let you know that obviously we do have a runtime that is Jakarta EE compatible, which is also why we talk about Jakarta EE. We obviously, it's technology that is very important to us and very close to us. So Payara Platform Payara Platform Enterprise is Jakarta EE compatible. So if you haven't tried it yet, you can go to our website. You can request it from our website. You can request a trial. You can also directly download Payara Platform Community. We recently released our new version, Payara Platform Community 6. So head over to our website, payara.fish, and you find the download links and request links on there. We also have Payara Micro, which is micro profile. We can use your micro profile deployments and it's and your Jakarta EE microservices deployments with Payara Micro. Just to remind you that we've got the other two parts of this series available next week and week after next. So part 2 will be on Thursday rather than Friday at the same time as today, and we will be talking about traditional enterprise development. And part 3 will be again on Friday, the week after that, on the 27th, and we will be talking about what got removed and deprecated in Jakarta EE 10. Right, I can see there's a question. Oh, I think, Lukman, you've already answered. Yeah, if there's a code available, and yes, we will make it available in the Payara examples repo for those of you who haven't seen Lukman's response there. So if you are interested in those other two parts, so traditional enterprise development and the what's got removed from Jakarta EE10 or for Jakarta EE10, please make sure you register to the other two parts of the webinar. So one registration does not mean that you are registered for the other two. So just a reminder about that. I posted the links in the chat. You can also go on our blog, blog.payara.fish, and you will find the post with links to the both registrations on there as well. Yes, and I think that's all. Just checking if there are any more questions. No. So yeah, thank you very much, Lukman, again for this very informative presentation and demo. And everyone have a lovely weekend, and we hope to see you next week on Thursday if you are coming back to the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. See you guys. Bye.
Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.